Time for our 3 things that you need to know at 10.
Number 1.
And I have to say, this next guest that we are inviting on the show is the sister-in-law of a friend of mine. My friend Michelle had reached out to me and said, have you seen what is going on with my sister-in-law who was vaccinated, still ended up in the hospital with COVID? So we have invited Kat Bunn from Vancouver, Washington, to join us right now. Good morning, Kat.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. So I understand that you are back home, but bring us back to when you got COVID. As I have been told by our producer, you got the Pfizer shot back in April, but you are immunosuppressed.
I am. I'm on immune suppression meds for inflammation, but I got vaccinated in April as soon as I could because I am immune suppressed, and I took a trip to Utah and Vegas with some friends, and unfortunately contracted COVID. When I was there, I didn't know. I thought I had a bad cold, and within 2 days, I went from a bad cold to really, really sick. I was high fever and just an incredible amount of pain with my back and my legs, kind of delirious. By then I was home. I went to the emergency. I tested for COVID, came back positive, went to the emergency, and they treated me, gave me oxygen, gave me IVs, got me stable, and said, well, we think we've done enough, and sent me home. But overnight, I got worse. And in the morning, I told my husband, I just can't do this anymore. I can hardly get out of bed. And he rushed me to the urgency care. They took one look at me and swooped me in. And I was just so busy struggling to breathe and, stay upright. And I heard him say, does her heartbeat say 200? And they said I had 103 temperature, and they swooped me into a private room and started treatment. And from there, I ended up in a COVID ward, which, to be honest, you've seen all this information online about COVID wards and COVID, and it just seems so mysterious. And so I really didn't know what was going to happen to me, but they rolled me in, hours later, because there is no room in the hospitals anymore. They are completely full up. And they finally got a space for me, and I had a roommate, and she, I believe, died. But she I spent with her the next 24 hours listening to her cry and plead and moan and beg to get off the oxygen mask that she was on, because her lungs were not able to maintain oxygen, and she was, I believe, claustrophobic, and she just was panicking. And I got to be straight with you. When they put me on high oxygen flow nasal cranial, it is very claustrophobic. It has water going through it because the oxygen is so high that it's hot. So you do feel a bit like you're drowning because the water is going in your nose and you're trying to breathe, and your brain just instinctively thinks I'm drowning.
Oh, wow.
So you try to pull it off, but you can't because you need it. So it was intense. The moment I was rushed to the ICU, my roommate's son had been allowed to come in because she decided she was done. She did not want to fight anymore. She wanted to die.
And you shared that, and I debated whether I would. I know that to hear her was so difficult for you too.
Oh yeah, she was pleading with me because the nurses had tied her hands down because she kept trying to pull her mask off, and it was the only thing keeping her alive. And they were pleading with her to please keep her mask on, that she was dying, and she was insistent that they were killing her, and it was not true. And they finally called her son in, and he had all the COVID gear on because they only allow a family member in if you're dying. And they put your, all the protection gear on him, and he sat with her and asked her, "Is this what you want?" And she said, "Yes, I'm done. And he said to her, we have to call." She had 3 sons and grandchildren because I kept hearing her phone calls, and she started making the calls saying goodbye. And at that time, my oxygen plummeted. I think it was horror at what I was hearing and just stress and COVID taking over. And the nurses ran in and put me on a BiPAP machine, but it was the only one they had was battery operated, and it was running out of battery. And somebody said, "There's a room in ICU. We got a bed. And it had one electric
machine,
BiPAP machine. And so they raced me to the ICU, literally raced me. They had the battery-operated machine, which was on wheels, and they had extra oxygen tanks on the bed with me. And about 6 nurses were surrounding my bed and running with me. I was on the 2nd floor COVID ward. ICU was up on the 5th. So they were running down the hallways with this machine. At one point, the machine pulled away from my mask, and I was grabbing it midair and clamping it back on my face as we were, running to the hallways on my bed. And we made an elevator, made it out, made it there, and they plugged me in. And there was 3 minutes left on the machine as they were running. And the nurses were all like, "I can't believe I made it. I can't believe we made it." And the whole time I'm just sitting there with this BiPAP machine, which is clamped on your face, which has huge amount of pressure and oxygen pushing into you, and just didn't realize that they had just saved my life. I was just so busy surviving. I didn't even think, "Oh, I'm dying."
Kat, you know what? I don't know that I've heard any story more gripping. When I read your entire post, I was blown away. I wanted to thank you for sharing that because we don't get to see this side of it, and the amount of detail that you went into, all of the different stories and the components that we don't get to see into the ICU room and what's happening. I wanted to ask you, a while ago I had just a COVID test because I thought I had COVID, and I had to stay away from my family for a couple of days waiting on the results, and it felt so isolating, just that. Can you talk to us a little bit about the isolation of it, what it was like having to try to live and fight for your life but not able to have family around in that process?
It was very surreal. I think because your body kind of goes into this fight or flight mode, and you become so concentrated on surviving. And I would have moments of clarity, and I would think, I have a special needs son. He's autistic. He's doing very well, but he needs a lot of emotional support. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my son? And he's been able to, not being able to see him, and knowing my husband was at home and, not able to see me. When I went into the emergency, I was not able to hug him goodbye because I didn't want him to catch COVID. I was kind of like, thank you. I staggered out of the car and went into the emergency. And it wasn't until after that I was healing that it really hit me. I would have not been able to see my son and say goodbye. I would have not been able to say goodbye to my husband. That was it. that's your last moment, is just living life, and then it's gone. And it's so, I just don't understand the unwillingness to get vaccinated when this is a reality. This is your loved ones, your family, that you're putting at risk and yourself at risk. It is real. That's why I started documenting it, to my friends on Facebook, because I had the same thought. We really didn't know what it was like to go through COVID. We kind of got bits and pieces, but we really didn't understand how intense it is, and how fast it is.
Kat, I'm so appreciative of you sharing this story. Though, that there are people even right now as we speak texting and doubting this idea that hospitals are full, or they want to know, were you a heavy smoker, or you were not a heavy smoker. You were not someone who was anti-vaccine.
No.
Absolutely not. But now, even though you were vaccinated and you got sick, you are still telling people they should get vaccinated. Why?
Yes, I'm saying it because, one, I listened to the nurses. They would come in and just talk, about their life. I think it was just kind of a moment where they had a break, because people around me, I would hear 2-3 times a day, code blue, which means cardiac arrest. I'm in a downgraded ICU room, so these people are dying, and these nurses are working double shifts. There's not enough nurses. The hospitals are full. That is not a political, a conspiracy theory. They are full. They are full up. The nurses are having, to try to fill in all these gaps. These were nurses from all over. Trinidad, Guatemala, Ukraine, people that had been away from their homes. One nurse was from South Carolina, a lot of traveling nurses that had been in the hospital for a year, away from their own families, because there is such a shortage and so many people down with COVID, and especially the Delta variant. It moves so quickly and very virulent, and people end up in the hospital, I think more so than when we first had the first run of COVID. According to the nurses, this Delta variant is fast and brutal, and that's, they believe, what I caught.
Oh, so Kat, we again are so thankful that you're back home. Obviously, you are still having some breathing issues, and you think it's going to be a while before you're fully recovered.
Oh, yeah. I'm on oxygen. I have a long Aquarian tube, that follows me everywhere. And mostly it's the incredible weakness. It just, I walk, I make myself a cup of tea, I sit down for the rest of the day. You're just so weak. And I'm fortunate where I can be home, but I can't imagine, the financial costs for people that have to work. There's no way you can work.
Right.
You catch COVID, you're down for months.
Kat Bunn from Vancouver, Washington, we thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story, and speedy recovery to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Number 2.